Hey there, everyone. Michael here. So, I had a podcast scheduled for right about now. However, we miscommunicated on the time zone, and I thought I'd take this opportunity to make a quick video. One of the most frequent questions I get asked in the realm of web development and web design is, "Hey, Mike, what platform is best for me? Should I use Wix? Should I use Squarespace? Should I use Weebly? Should I use Shopify? There are so many great options out there. Which one should I choose?" Now, as the famous saying goes, there's no best solution. However, there's a best solution for you. And let's explore that. So, I do think overall there's certain options that are almost consistently better than other ones. But let's preface here by saying that getting this wrong is not a small mistake. It's sometimes a really costly one. Not necessarily costly in terms of money, but it could be costly in terms of time and resources to get it right. So it's important to do a little bit of homework in the beginning because it can certainly pay off in the long run. Uh, Another point here is that you want to be able to pick a platform that you can scale on and that you can grow on. Because very likely when you're on the onset of your virtual journey, you don't necessarily know where you're heading. And you might think you know where you're heading, but as you grow, your direction can shift. And you want to be able to account for that in the platform you choose. You don't want to necessarily pick a platform that might be really simplistic at the onset, but you hit a ceiling really quickly. And your next step in your journey is tearing down what you have now and rebuilding in order to take that next step. And you want to be able to scale and build on that foundation, not have to find yourself in a cycle of tearing down and rebuilding. Also, cheaper is more expensive sometimes. So going for the most economical solution can end up being more costly in the long run. And simplicity is not always your friend. Sometimes when a platform is too simplistic, you find yourself at the mercy of the system's simplicity. So those are a few nuggets for thought here. And now moving forward, and my choice overall, right? If you're doing something that's fairly in the typical use case, I highly, highly recommend WordPress. And first, let me start with that. Why do I recommend WordPress? I think WordPress won for the most part because it offers a very good balance between customization and complexity and user simplicity. It's an open source software. Think of like Linux. Well, I'm sorry. Think of like Windows. It's an operating system that you put on your computer. And it's the same thing. WordPress is like an operating system that you put on your web server, right? And it's essentially a CMS, a content management system. And what it does beautifully is it allows you to separate structure from content. And why is that amazing? Because you can have a programmer develop the structure while you, someone who might not necessarily be versed in web development, can go ahead and manipulate the content. And if you are somewhat tech savvy, you can even dabble with the structure, which we'll get to in a second. WordPress works on PHP, which is a very commonly supported language across web servers, especially typical Apache Linux-based servers. And there's a thriving and vibrant community. So when you have issues with WordPress, you're very likely going to get good support, and it's open source, meaning it's just a collection of web developers around the world have contributed to this software. The software is open for anyone to look at, and that allows for really smart people on their own to kind of make contributions and provide input. At the same time, there's always an engineering trade-off, and at the same time, since there's open source code, bad actors can know exactly what they're aiming for. So WordPress runs 1/3 of the internet. And the problem with that is, well, that's a great thing. But the problem with that is that if I am going to create a bad piece of code and I want to attack and get the highest statistical degree of success, first of all, it's important I know what I'm attacking. With WordPress, the structure becomes predictable, but also it's so widely used that you're just rattling people's doorknobs, going through IP address to IP address, looking for any sort of response, you get one. You can statistically make the assumption that the site is WordPress. And that's really beneficial for hackers as well. It allows them to get the greatest yield, but it also gives them predictive power. So, and of course, there are great security measures to be taken to protect your WordPress sites. WordPress is fairly secure, especially if you constantly apply yourself with updates and you use good tools, a good host, good password protocols and whatnot. So it just means you need to be a little more diligent about using WordPress, but at the same time, the benefits are tremendous. So now just to take a tiny step back here, WordPress, you can buy, and here's the thing, there's a whole spectrum of how you can use WordPress. You can buy these pre-existing themes, right? Which is great. You pay a few dollars, so you can pay for some of them are free. You can go ahead and make your own theme using a content builder, which we can talk about. There's Divi, there's Elementor, there's quite a few ones. The kings in the industry now are those two. And there was a competitive battle for a while. Apparently, Divi's coming out with this huge update, and it's why they haven't been focusing too much on their current infrastructure. They're actually remapping their entire internal structure of how they do content builders. But the real king right now is Elementor, which we'll talk about in a moment. Those are content builders. And you can take a step up and you can say, hey, I would like to make a custom theme. So you can hire a web developer and you can create a custom theme on WordPress and attach itself and use all the benefits and hooks that WordPress has to offer. So you can get that real complexity and sophistication and customization, while at the same time, you can benefit from some pretty heavy pre-existing technology. So you don't have to reinvent your backend, this whole backend structure. You don't have to reinvent you don't have to recreate all these security protocols. And yeah, it's a beautiful middle ground. So that would be WordPress. Now, when shouldn't you use WordPress? So honestly, at both ends of the spectrum. If you're extremely simplistic and you don't necessarily have any budget, you don't want to hire a developer, you don't want to spend time, you want to build a website in like under an hour, you've got some like, I don't know, you have some basement job and it's really small and you want to just test out, you want to create an MVP, a minimal viable product. You don't really care much about your website, you just need some online presence. WordPress might not be ideal for you. You can use sites like Wix, right? Wix can be free and it can do the trick, right? You're not necessarily caring about search engine optimization and all that good stuff. Perfect. The other end of the spectrum, you need something truly proprietary, heavily custom. You're really out of the niche. You've got a very, very nuanced use case. WordPress might not be the ideal solution for you as well. But what's beautiful about WordPress is not only is it ideal for the center, it really spreads out to both ends of the spectrum. So unless you're really, really basic or unless you're really, really sophisticated, WordPress is something you should certainly consider. Now, let's just start from the very bottom, the types of use cases you would use WordPress for. So you can use WordPress you can use WordPress with a theme. So some themes are free, they're pretty basic, but they're great. And you can just download a theme, plug it in, and you do have some customization power. However, you might be limited. Not something I would personally do, and not something we offer in our company. Next would be you can have a paid theme. Still not something I would do. Because it still doesn't offer that beautiful engineering middle ground between customization and simplicity and flexibility and out of the box ease of use. Sorry. So it doesn't have that because you're paying for a theme. It's just a little more sophisticated, but at the same time, you're still at the mercy of these functionalities and you're given very generic use cases. The people who make these themes are often trying to accommodate a broad demographic. So they want to make this website usable by a lawyer, by someone who runs a restaurant and this and that. And sometimes there are themes that are more customized, but even then, if you're creating a generic lawyer theme, it still has all those weird generic feels to it. The brand doesn't feel very customized often. You could find a way that works. You really can. But I'm speaking broadly here, and it's not something I tend to invest energy exploring the ideal solution. And you can always go on, like there are these sites that sell. I don't have to necessarily call anyone else specifically, but there are these sites that sell like hundreds of WordPress themes. You can type in Google top WordPress themes 2023, 2024, 2022, whatever. Well, it's 2023 now, but you might be watching this in a year from now. So yeah, you can just Google top WordPress themes and get your, go through a whole bunch of choices and you can make a decision on your own. Here's where I kind of like to dabble in. Here's the area that I'm comfortable in, and that's using content builders. So we started off using Divi and it was really great. However, we noticed there were scalability issues, got very cluttered very quickly. Memory allocation wasn't the best. The user interface got bogged down fairly quickly, and the use of just optimization, using the proper images and the proper settings wasn't really working for us. And we're having conflicts with quite a few plugins that should not be having conflicts so often. So, and we kind of started realizing that, hey, Elementor is really taking the lead here. And that certainly was the case. So we switched over to Elementor, and I have to tell you, it's changed. I was really not very open to the concept of content builders initially. I'd say about a year and a half, 2 years ago. We were actually doing custom themes for everyone. We had these like pre-existing structures, so we didn't have to start from scratch every time. But at the same time, there was still an element of patternization and an element of redundancy that I felt could be mitigated, and we could be creating output with a much smaller time frame. So once we started dabbling with Elementor, I became really, really happy with it. And I have to say, it's truly a winner. So using Elementor on top of WordPress, to me, has just been extremely powerful. Gave us a lot of power, and we're able to create really quick, high-quality results. The backend is absolutely great to use. It doesn't get cluttered as you start adding stuff. You can truly optimize it. And yes, there is a lot of something called database chaining when you're using content builders, because structure is no longer coming from PHP files. A lot of it's coming from the database. So that is an engineering setback. But the way you offset this is your real performance issues should just really come from the admin panel, or when you're in development phase, or when you have admin privileges. When an end user hits the site, if you're using good caching, essentially, you're just not going to invoke that PHP parser a lot. You're not going to be doing any database chaining whatsoever, at least as little as possible. And you're going to be returning HTML files. So, I mean, no matter how cluttered it can be, even with something like Divi, if you have really strong caching, and it's really a band-aid to a problem, but it's like you have a flood in the house, you're just finding ways to buy bigger buckets. You're not necessarily stopping the flood. You're not attacking the root cause, but it's not that bad with Elementor. And at the same time, you get extremely fast output with good caching. We use WP Rocket, or if you have a Lightspeed server, you can use Lightspeed, and that really does the trick. Plus, if you have a good proxy server, if you have something like Cloudflare and you're doing your caching, there's always separation. So like, WordPress, you're separating content from structure. And then when you're caching, you want to separate your content specific from your assets, from your CSS files. So those CSS files are distributed to hundreds of servers around the world. And then when someone, let's just say in Taiwan, requests your website, it'll pull the caching assets from a server in Taiwan, which will give it a really quick response. And then it will just get your database content or some additional content from the server in California. Anyways, I digress. So yeah, WordPress is really good. Now, WooCommerce, so we're talking about shop, like an e-commerce platform. You're doing transactions online. This is where it gets a little murky. Shopify does a really good job. They do. And for very basic use cases, it's not bad. They take a cut for every transaction. You don't own your code. You're paying a monthly fee, and then once you stop, it just disappears. I don't know too much about Shopify. We use it here and there, but WooCommerce is kind of like Elementor. It's a plugin. Elementor is more of a theme, but can also be used as a plugin, not to get confusing. WooCommerce is an actual plugin that allows you to download e-commerce assets into your WordPress system. There are other tools that do e-commerce transactions through WordPress, but WooCommerce is like the giant. It's like the king for e-commerce integration into WordPress. It works well. It certainly works well. I certainly recommend it. When you get a little nuance, you realize for every tiny nuance, for every tiny feature, you have to download another plugin. And you have all these plugins that WooCommerce does create. So for the most part, you do get somewhat of a consistent structure, but it does become a little annoying when you have to have a plugin for recurring payments. You have to have a plugin for memberships. You have to have a plugin for this, plugin for that. And plugins are candy for bad actors in general. So I'll kind of diverge here, and I have ADHD if you haven't realized. But the thing about plugins is you're able to attach modules that are created by someone else. There's like a plugin library, and you can easily pull these plugins into your WordPress platform. So you generally want to stick to using the least amount of plugins, using the WordPress core or Elementor or whatever it is as much as possible, and being creative yet elegant about how you kind of implement new features instead of constantly pulling plugins. When you constantly pull plugins, the problem is that some of those plugins aren't created by people as well experienced as those who created the WordPress core. And the security measures, the proper testing is not implemented. You can have some guy in his basement across the world making these plugins. And what happens is that when there are security flaws, or when a security flaw is detected by someone, what they can do is they can mass produce code. So they can produce code that'll start rattling your doorknob looking for WordPress and looking for that specific plugin, and then they can start hacking websites left and right. So that's generally an issue with using bad plugins. However, good ones are good. They do. And you will need plugins, that's for sure. I try to have less than maybe 10 or 7 plugins on a website, but sometimes I do need more. That all being said, WooCommerce does work pretty well. If you get the right integrations and you kind of test all your use cases. I personally don't love using WooCommerce when it comes to like auto-calculating shipping, but just for basic transactions, for subscriptions, for service, for digital assets, certainly a great solution. And at some point, if you're really thinking long-term here, you want to do 2 things. You don't want to take my word or anyone's word for it. You want to get, like, can you go to a doctor and you're getting diagnosed? The problem is some doctors are experts in very nuanced areas. And when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So, they'll diagnose your situation within the frame of their expertise. And to them, it's not that they're giving you bad advice intentionally. It's just they're giving you advice based on just whatever they know. Getting a second doctor's opinion can be truly helpful. You'll get intelligent perspectives. You'll get intelligent information from different perspectives. So getting 2 or 3 web developers' advice is crucial. And sometimes even getting advice from someone who's truly an unbiased actor. So someone who's not trying to convince you of a sale, getting their advice. And often, here's what you can do. You can find someone who's truly expensive, with an absolute expert in web development. And you can say, listen, I can't afford you for a whole project, but what I would love to pay you is for 30 minutes of your time. Here's the proposals I got from various developers. Here's a problem I'm trying to solve. Can I get your input? Which developer would you choose? Are they giving me good advice? And what advice would you give me in how to move forward in this project? That might cost you $1,000, $500, whatever it may be. But that might save you $50,000, $20,000 in the long run. That might save you tons of time and stress. Because a lot of developers, first of all, some of them are not very technical, right? They just know how to use WordPress. They don't know how to go under the hood. They don't understand PHP in depth. They don't understand JavaScript in depth. So the tools they use really aren't ideal, and you could get a site you're not very happy with. Also, there is an inverse relationship, not for everyone, but there is an inverse relationship between being a really good developer and a really poor designer, or being a really great designer and a really poor developer. They often require a different set of skills, almost as if they're strangely mutually exclusive. So, being highly technical and being highly artistic doesn't necessarily come, with the same person. So you could find full stack, and you do have those people who are extremely creative and extremely technical, or technical enough to do the job at a proper level. Those are just great people to look for and to find. That's the first thing. You see, my ADHD here has kind of got me down a rabbit hole. So we were talking about, doing things correctly. So getting a second opinion is truly, truly important. Yes. And the second thing would be trying both platforms yourself. There's nothing wrong with even just exploring, spending 4 or 5 hours, exploring Shopify, exploring WooCommerce, watching YouTube tutorials and watching, Shopify versus WooCommerce, which one is best? What's the best e-commerce platform in 2023? And just taking a whole bunch of opinions in from even non-professionals or people who have used it, end users, can be truly helpful. So that's pretty much the rundown. Oh yeah, and then we have the last case here is creating a custom proprietary, creating your own WordPress theme on top of WordPress. If you realize that you could do it with Elementor and you could do it with all these plugins, but having someone do it custom because your use case is very specific and there aren't the best tools out there, then creating a custom theme is a solution for you. And this really is a technical conversation because you can often manipulate Elementor, you can manipulate plugins to do your specific use case, or you can recreate your own structures. And that is really a cost benefit analysis here. You want to say, hey, what are all the costs, the time, the resources I need? How would it be in the long run? Will I constantly have issues when I update plugins? As opposed to, am I reinventing the wheel? Am I doing all this extra double work for something that I can, and you look at kind of the unique points. So like, these are the unique features that really are out of the ordinary. I want to focus on these unique features. Is it worth it for me to force these unique features and pre-existing structures? Or does it make sense for me to recreate these unique features hiring a developer? And that's a nuanced conversation. That's specifically getting a few opinions of web developers can be truly helpful here. And many people go through 80%. And here's a problem with web developments and web development projects is a lot of people get burnt. The problem is that two things. First of all, you don't necessarily know, you're not a web developer, you might not be a web designer, and you can't discern what is BS and what is technical complexity that you need to respect. So when someone tells you, hey, it's really complicated, so take a lot of time, this and that, you don't know if it's just something that you should be pushing back on or something you should be like, oh, listen, I don't want to, breathe over their shoulder. The second thing here is that not only is it hard to discern between BS and technical complexity, it's also hard to see a problem at its early stages. So with software development in general, your outcome is highly dependent on your initial conditions. What I mean by that is you can have inefficiencies in the early stages. They don't necessarily express themselves or manifest until you're about 85%, 80% to the project. And the problem here is that people who are doing bad work can give you a presentation that looks good. You hit that 80% mark, and then changing a color on your website takes 3 hours instead of 40 seconds. And that's because the initial design structure is poor, those initial conditions are off, and now the web developer goes, oh, I might have been paid for 80% of the project, and this last 20% is just impossible, and then unfortunately you get burned and they run away. And you're left with 80% of a project that's completely done, but you're left with 80% of nothing. So, this all comes back to the emphasis of why doing your homework in the beginning is so important. And even you don't have to necessarily love web development, you don't have to necessarily be a web developer, but entering the conversation and engaging with web developers and showing them that you have competence and you have a basic understanding of the industry and you can respect their technical process will do two things. It's always two things. They will respect working for you because they'll feel like, hey, this is someone who will understand me, who will respect my technical process, and they'll give me the creative liberty. At the same time, I'll be able to show them my unique value. And the second thing here is they'll know that you can discern between BS and technical complexity to some capacity, and they're more likely going to give you a lot more value, whether they're conscious of it or not, in their proposal. So just coming into the system competent, doing your homework, getting a second opinion, and truly exploring your options with WordPress or whatever it may be. And within the realm of WordPress, learning what specific solution is best for you. Should you use a paid theme, a free theme? Should you use Elementor like a content builder? Should you use Divi, or should you get into proprietary or custom theme development? Understanding all this stuff at a basic level, it truly, especially if you're a founder or you're an industry leader, will truly set you apart from someone who doesn't and allow you to make healthy decisions, and it'll increase the productivity of your entire company. We didn't even talk about SEO actually, but that can be a whole other conversation. And WordPress is exceptionally good for SEO. There's tools out of the box like Rank Math, which we can talk about another time. So I hope you found this video helpful at the very least. And if you have questions, you can always reach out to me, Michael Peres. Our web development company is called hexatiger.com. And feel free to ask us questions and reach out. Wishing you guys a great day.